It began like any ordinary school day and ended as something no one could explain. If you enjoy real-life mysteries that feel darker than fiction, make sure you hit like and subscribe, because today's story isn't just strange, it's unsettling. In 1962, in a quiet village near Lake Victoria, in what is now Tanzania, a small boarding school for girls became the center of one of the most disturbing psychological events ever recorded. First, it sounded harmless, even amusing until it wasn't. Started with a joke. No one remembers exactly what the joke was. Some say it wasn't even funny, but one student laughed, then another, then another. Within minutes, a group of girls was laughing uncontrollably. Not giggling, not chuckling, laughing. Deep, breathless, unstoppable laughter. Teachers initially ignored it. Children laugh. That's normal. But this wasn't normal. The laughter didn't stop. It stretched from minutes into hours. Some girls collapsed to the ground, clutching their stomachs, gasping for air between bursts of hysterical laughter. Others began crying while laughing, their faces twisted between joy and terror. By the end of the day, dozens of students were affected, and the laughter was spreading. Within a week, over half the school had fallen into these episodes. Some lasted hours, others lasted days. The girls couldn't eat properly. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't focus. Their bodies trembled, their lungs strained, and still, they laughed. Parents were called. Doctors were called. No one had answers. There was no infection, no toxin, no physical cause. But something was happening. Teachers began noticing something far more disturbing than the laughter itself. Between episodes, the girls described a feeling, like something was pressing down on them, like a weight in the air. Some whispered that when the laughter started, it didn't feel like it came from them. One girl reportedly said, "It's like something inside me is laughing, and I can't make it stop." That's when fear began to replace confusion. The school tried to contain it. Classes were suspended. Students were isolated. But it didn't matter. The laughter followed them home. Within weeks, nearby villages began reporting the same symptoms. Entire families, children who had never met the original students, began laughing uncontrollably. Adults too. Farmers dropped their tools in the fields, overcome by sudden fits. Mothers laughed while crying, unable to comfort their own children. It was no longer a school problem. It was something else, something bigger, and it was spreading. Authorities stepped in. Medical teams examined the victims, but every test came back normal. No disease, no chemical exposure, nothing in the water, nothing in the food. Psychologists suggested mass hysteria, a shared psychological response triggered by stress. But that explanation didn't sit right with everyone, because of what witnesses were saying. Some claimed the laughter wasn't random, came in waves. Entire groups would fall silent at once. Then suddenly, as if triggered by something unseen, they would erupt into laughter again. At the exact same moment, others described hearing something just before it started. A whisper, not clear words, just a sound, like someone trying to speak from far away. And then, the laughter would begin. One teacher later recalled walking through an empty classroom late in the evening. The school had already been shut down by then. Windows open, desks abandoned, and yet, she heard it. Faint giggle. She turned. No one was there. Then another giggle, closer this time, followed by a chorus of laughter that seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls, echoing through the halls. She ran. The school was officially closed soon after, but shutting the doors didn't stop it. For months, the laughter epidemic moved from village to village. Over 1,000 people were affected. Entire communities were paralyzed. Schools shut down. Daily life collapsed. And still, no explanation. Some victims recovered after days. Others took weeks. A few much longer. But even after the laughter stopped, something lingered. Many reported a lasting fear, an anxiety they couldn't explain. Some refused to return to school. Others avoided crowds entirely. And then there were those who claimed it never truly left them. Years later, a handful of survivors admitted that sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, they still feel it. That same pressure in the chest, that same tightening in the throat. And for a brief moment, they have to fight the urge to laugh. Not because something is funny, but because something is still there, watching, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, ready to start again. And for some, that moment didn't stay a moment. It grew. Years after the official reports had stopped, after doctors labeled it mass hysteria and moved on, there were quiet stories that never made it into records. Stories people didn't want to tell, because saying them out loud made them feel real again. One former student, now an adult, agreed to speak, on the condition her name was never shared. Her voice trembled, not like someone recalling a memory, but like someone reliving it. She said the laughter didn't just happen. It arrived. She described the first time it came back. It was late at night. Her house was silent. No wind, no voices, nothing unusual. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when she felt it. That same invisible weight pressing down on her chest. Not pain, not fear, just pressure. Then, a thought entered her mind, not her own. A single, simple thought, laugh. She tried to ignore it, but then she heard something, a faint sound, like a breath behind her ear. And suddenly, she was laughing, not loudly, not wildly like before, but softly, controlled, almost deliberate. She said that was the most terrifying part, because this time it didn't feel like losing control. It felt like something else was learning. Across different villages, similar accounts surfaced. People who had been part of the original outbreak claimed that even years later, the episodes would return, but differently. Shorter, quieter, more precise. A man who had been a child during the epidemic described waking up one night to the sound of laughter outside his home. He stepped out, expecting to find people. There was no one there, but the laughter didn't stop. It circled him, moved around him, as if something unseen was walking in slow circles, just beyond his sight. Then it stopped instantly, and in that silence he heard it. A whisper, clear this time. You remember. He never spoke about it again publicly. Local elders, however, had their own interpretation, one that predates modern psychology. They believed the land itself held something restless, something ancient, something that didn't communicate through words, but through emotion, through influence, through control. And laughter, they said, was just the easiest way in, because laughter lowers your guard. It opens you up. And once you're open, something else can step in. What made the Tanganyika Laughter Epidemic so unsettling wasn't just its scale. It was its behavior. It didn't follow the patterns of illness. It didn't spread like a virus. It moved like a presence, targeting groups, shifting locations, appearing, disappearing, then reappearing miles away without warning. Even today, scientists stand by the explanation of mass psychogenic illness, a chain reaction of stress and emotion spreading unconsciously through social groups. And on the surface, that explanation works. But it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the synchronized episodes. It doesn't explain the whispers. And it definitely doesn't explain why, decades later, people who experienced it still describe the same feeling. Like something is just behind them, close enough to touch, but never visible. One chilling detail often overlooked is how the epidemic eventually ended. There was no cure, no treatment, no official resolution. Simply faded, as if whatever had started it had lost interest, or finished what it came to do. But what if it didn't leave? What if it just changed? Because if you think about it, laughter is one of the most contagious human behaviors. You don't need to understand it. You don't even need to find it funny. You just join in, almost automatically. And that raises a disturbing question. If something could influence people once, using something as simple as laughter, what's stopping it from doing it again? Somewhere else, in a different form, in a different way, maybe not as obvious, maybe not as extreme, but subtle enough to go unnoticed, until it's too late. So the next time you hear laughter, and you don't know where it's coming from, or worse, When you suddenly feel like laughing, for no reason at all, just pause for a second and ask yourself one thing. Is it really you? Or is it something else? If the story stayed with you, if it made you question things even for a moment, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more real stories that blur the line between reality and something far darker. Because sometimes, the scariest things aren't the ones we see. They're the ones we feel and can't explain.